I'm Denise Clayton, formerly Chief Judge of the Kentucky Court of Appeals. I want to say first, and apologize to the panelists here, I just got back last night at 10 o'clock from Europe. I was up 24 hours. I don't really know where I am. I don't know what day it is, and I don't really know what time it is. So if I tend to look disengaged, please forgive me, because in addition to all that, they lost my luggage. Coming back, they did find it again, and this morning my car wouldn't start. So otherwise, I'm in good shape. I also want to thank Chief Justice Minton for his comments about Laurie. When I was on the court, of course, Chief Justice Minton, as well as the Supreme Court, often dictated what I would say in my opinions, literally, and they then told me I was wrong in other cases. And today, Chief Justice Minton, continuing that tradition, totally took away my introduction of Laurie. So thank you once again for asserting your authority. I appreciate it. Laurie, I really like you, but, I don't know if I need to say too much more about you, other than I appreciate you taking my phone calls, no matter how ridiculous they were. So thank you. Also, in addition to Laurie, we have Judge Maier. I only had the opportunity to meet you during our planning meetings, but she is the circuit court judge in the 25th Circuit, which includes Madison and Clark counties. Prior to that appointment and election, she was on the district court bench, and she is currently the presiding judge for Clark Circuit Court Drug Court, and served recently as a co-chair for the Specialty Court Certification Advisory Committee. The next person on our panel is Rachel Bingham, who is in charge of the Office of Statewide Programs, which includes family and juvenile services. Rachel has managed over the years to get me involved in stuff that I didn't know anything about. And I appreciate it. Thank you again for this opportunity today. It's the department is a wonderful resource, and as chair of our Racial Fairness Commission in Jefferson County, really your help has been invaluable. So with that, I will leave it to the three of you.
I guess we do.
No, the mic.
That's right. It's been a long
day.
It's been a long day already, and I'm really hoping that there are no more surprises in this day. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for hanging in there with us, and thank you for being here for the lunch plenary session. As I mentioned just a minute ago, I hadn't kind of been prepared, I think, really to transition, and I'm still kind of trying to transition just a little bit, but really wanted to speak to kind of the national scene. Thank you, Rachel. I think you're actually the one with the clicker, aren't you? Okay, perfect. So I know that a lot of us in each of our fields are doing a lot of work in this area, and the National Center for State Courts, through a grant with the State Justice Institute, and I want to give another shout out to retired Chief Justice Minton. He chairs the State Justice Institute board. With a relatively small budget and some stretched funding, we were really able to launch something that has turned into quite the national initiative. I want to give a shout out quickly to Michelle White, who also works for the State Justice Institute. Sorry, Michelle, I didn't mean to catch you, but I want to just thank you again for all your support the last few years, because they've been such a fantastic partner, not only for the courts, state courts at the national level, but also for us here in Kentucky. We really began some of this work publicly in 2006 as we began doing a lot of research work on decriminalizing mental illness. And everyone saw Judge Leifman's presentation this morning, and probably the most powerful speaker and presenter that I've ever heard. But the fact that he started this work in Miami in the early 2000s, and he has been doing this for 20 years, and we're able to bring what he has learned over the course of the last 20 years to you is so important. But in March of 2020, the Conference of Chief Justices and the Conference of State Court Administrators launched the National Task Force to examine state courts' response to mental illness. And over the course of the next 2 years, in the middle of the pandemic, I want to add, because all the work had been done, they were ready to launch, and then facing the pandemic for the next 2 years, did a lot of their work remotely as much as possible, have developed hundreds of resources that we're using today, and much of what we're going to talk about today, the statewide Intercept model, is a result of that work. There's overwhelming public support for the work that we do in the court system, and I want to share just a couple of really important statistics for you. In a 2022 national poll, a State of the State Courts polling result revealed that 82% of respondents believe that state courts should help individuals find treatment options, and an overwhelming 89% believe courts should divert low-risk offenders with behavioral health issues. And as we've heard many of our judges tell you today, I think they believe that conceptually also, but they've never had any place else to divert the resources. So I think what this session is kind of the launch for everybody to go back to your communities and begin connecting resources, because these really are community-based projects. And what each of you do will look different, but there are so many great national examples. We're going to have these resources available that the commission is going to put out much of this work. But really kind of want to just let you know that the resources and materials are there. This is something that you get to build. And really important that you ask questions, you network with each other, talk to other folks in other communities to find out what they're doing. And, I think, Judge Maier, kind of kicking to you quickly, just in our prep sessions we were talking about this, I thought how many things Franklin County could learn from the many great things that Clark County is doing. But before I think we really get there, I know we want to talk, I think, about, Rachel, if you want to pop to the next slide, the judicial branch leadership piece, why judges as conveners is so important.
So I'm really happy to see all of you today. I don't think I've talked to this many people at one time since I graduated from high school, and that's suddenly seeming like a long time ago. And I would also say I've never been so comfortable being uncomfortable, and part of the discomfort here is when you speak with colleagues, with people that you hold in such high esteem, or you occupy a stage with people you respect so much. It's a very humbling experience. So I'm both grateful and humbled to be here today, but I'm talking to you not as a representative of the judges. I'm talking to you as one person who is a judge, right? Cole Maier is important to maybe 6 to 12 people. But the 25th Circuit Judge for Division 2 is important to 2 counties and maybe some others if I'm able to be impactful in other forms of leadership, right? So I'm talking to you about your role as a judge. And I'm not telling you what to do. To be clear, you are the expert, judges, colleagues, folks that are out there. You're the expert on your jurisdiction. I might have some utility in Clark and Madison County, and if you drop me in Kenton County or Callaway County, you're not going to see the same outcomes. So I will remind you, as we talk here today, I'm not advising you to do anything that's inconsistent with judicial ethics. I'm encouraging you to take ownership over the fact that you're the expert in your jurisdiction, right? The phrase one of my favorite retired judges likes to say is we are a unified court of justice. We are not a uniform court of justice. And if that is an idea that you've embraced, that you've held, that you've sometimes maybe even pushed back to say to people, we're unified, not uniform, this is the time for you to take individual ownership over what's going on in your circuits, in your districts, in your counties. First big thank you today is going to be for showing up. That's the first act of leadership that the judges and everyone else here has done. It's a huge lift at this time of year. Promotions, graduations, all of that sort of stuff's going on in your personal life. And in addition to that, you have busy professional lives, so we're grateful for you being present with us today. Grateful for your attention when there's cheesecake on the table, because it looks like people are already diving into that. So thanks for taking a look at us when there's other stuff to do. Why are we here talking about judicial branch leadership, though? Why is the judicial branch well suited to do this? And from the National Judicial Task Force to examine state courts' response to mental illness, an estimated 70% of individuals involved in the criminal justice system have a behavioral health disorder. That makes state courts a significant referral source for community behavioral treatment. And significantly, if not disappointingly, it often makes jails, our county jails, the largest behavioral health facilities in a given jurisdiction. That's at least a little bit of an insight as to why this matters to the judicial branch, why it should matter to judges. The other thing I will say, we're going to talk about the criminal justice system as we talk about some of these mapping initiatives. But don't forget about the civil justice system, because it exists and it impacts our communities and it impacts people with behavioral health issues daily, right? If you do involuntary commitments, involuntary hospitalizations, involuntary treatment, that's obvious. But think about how maybe these behavioral health issues impact your forcible detainer docket, other types of matters that come before your court. To make a difference regarding behavioral health, we've got to understand the issues and look to create a new path going forward. And courts are well positioned to bring together a bunch of stakeholders to consider and implement effective responses to communities in crisis. And that's true, right? We don't love it. We don't want to take ownership over that all the time, but our communities are in crisis and our citizens are in crisis. Coordination between the behavioral health and justice system in states and communities is often lacking, and it's ineffective in providing ways in which we can reduce recidivism, which is a goal of everyone's here, whether it's for personal reasons, financial reasons, other reasons. We all want to see people coming back to our justice system less frequently. On state and local levels, behavioral health and justice system stakeholders and community leaders have to come together and examine their systems. And that's why we're talking about coming back to your local levels. That's why you, the judge, are the expert in things going on in your community. Because there are statewide initiatives here, but where we're going to start making real changes is at home, with your community health providers, with your doctors, with other treatment sources, with your local hospital system. So again, I'm telling you, the charge at the end of this, I'll go ahead and give you a peek at the end, is that we want you to go home and keep working on this in case you missed that message from Laurie, in case you missed that message from the other judges and folks you've heard from today. Judge Leifman said earlier in his presentation in the breakouts, he said, we didn't start with a grand plan, right? So we don't expect any of you to go home with a grand plan. You fix these problems that have existed for decades and decades. We just expect that you'll go home and send an email that says, hey, Judge Maier would like for you to come to this meeting this week, right? It still blows my mind, but if I send an email from Judge Maier, people show up. I don't really get it. You heard Judge Leifman say it too. I don't understand it. But I remember being an attorney and getting an email from Judge Logue that said show up, and I couldn't get there fast enough. I just sat outside her office until it was time to meet. I wouldn't have missed it for anything, right? And so judges, you do have that position of leadership and authority. Send the email. If you look at your handout that's seated down there, you'll see certain ways in which we know that courts can lead. I'll touch them briefly, but I'm not going to read them to you. We've already done some of these things, convene multidisciplinary stakeholders. We've done that at a statewide issue with the Judicial Commission, develop task force and work groups, and you'll see that work all week here. Hire a statewide behavioral health administrator, which has been done. Big things to look forward next year as we approach a legislative session is all of this kind of coming together to advance state legislative issues and policy changes. Building relationships, and that's fundamentally the most important part of all of our jobs, right? If you get honest about what it is that you're doing, you're building relationships with your clients, with your patients, with people in court, and with the other folks you work with. A big thing here, this is another reason why it's got to get local, is you have to identify existing initiatives and groups already working to improve behavioral circumstances in your community. I had the occasion to go to Miami in 2022 to do the decriminalizing mental illness presentation with Judge Leifman. And that's the first time when I started hearing some of this talked about in an organized way, but I came back and was talking with colleagues about my trip, and I found out from one of our community resources that there was already a diversion deflection program going on in town regarding law enforcement officers. I was a judge, I didn't know about it, and if I hadn't had the conversation about how my trip went and what I learned, I might not know about it today. So again, sometimes it's just sitting there having the conversation and bringing people together. Training, mapping workshops, all those will go into more detail. I would submit to everybody though, the judicial branch, you've heard us talk about the judicial branch being at an intersection. The judicial branch is at the crossroads. I would say the judicial branch has a very unique vantage point. We interact with policy, but we don't draft policy. We utilize behavioral health resources, but we don't provide services. So we are constantly in contact with both policy and services, and we see them in action, but we don't do either of those things. But it gives us a chance to see from a little bit of a distance where we think there are gaps, where we think there are successes, and how this is working for our communities. So without being critical, without pointing fingers at one another, we can say, this is what we see, what am I missing, right? Sit down at the table and find out what you have in front of you and find out where you need to plug in gaps. So I guess I would ask both of you all, and we've talked about this some, why should the court system be interested in diverting or deflecting or preventing people from coming to the justice system? If we don't do policy, why do we care whether they get to us or not?
So I think there are probably several reasons, and I think there's the practical business reason. Because what we've been doing isn't working. You're seeing the same people in front of you over and over and over again, and it truly is the definition of insanity if you're expecting the results to change. I think that's the practical. But then I think there is also what is perhaps the personal, and I think it's why should courts care about prevention? Why should courts care that we want to divert people out of the court system? And, you know, you think about it as a practicing attorney. There isn't anything more intimidating to me to go stand in front of a judge as a practicing attorney. If I'm intimidated by that, I can't imagine how an individual suffering mental health issues must feel. But not only to stand in front of the judge. Keep in mind they're there because they have a complete inability to navigate the system. They end up there because there's a warrant commanding their appearance. And, you know, in 1 out of 3 times, maybe they actually appear. That's another practical reason for us to care, because this population has a very high failure to appear rate. They're going to fill our jails, and we're never going to see them in our courtrooms because they're going to be picked up on a warrant. But I think also is understanding how fearful these folks are in front of you and how lost they are when they have to navigate the system. And our circuit court clerks in Kentucky, 120 in each county and 1,600 employees statewide, really are the face of the court system. And we've given our clerks very few tools to assist these people or to send them to resources where they need some help. Somebody, and Judge Maier mentioned it a minute ago, they may be facing foreclosure. We know this as someone that there's rental assistance dollars out there, but they don't have the ability to navigate the system, find the rental assistance dollars, or even advocate for themselves. And this is also somebody that once they get a minor criminal charge on their record, landlords, understandably, are doing background checks county by county by county. These folks, once they get evicted from this home or they're charged with possession, are never going to be able to find suitable housing again. So we continue to perpetuate the cycle. And I don't know that that's necessarily answerable, but we've got the practical, and then I think we've got what is the emotional. But Rach,
Yes, I agree, and I also think that it takes the collaboration. So I want to do a real quick strategy. Is everybody ready? Let's see if we can do this. I've never been in a room with this many people. If I count to 3, let's see, the servers too, let's see literally how quiet this room can be. 1, 2, 3. Wow, look, everybody's, I love that. I've never had this many people. It's great to have you here, so excited. And one of the things about collaboration is exactly what we've experienced, and that's the fact that you have a moment to take a breath, to talk with your community partners, to really try to figure out ways that you can do things differently that support what is what we would call from the Court of Justice our court community. And so, you know, the court community touches everyone, and how that operates for, you know, who we would consider, you know, we're public servants if we're working for the Court of Justice. We're public servants if we are serving the people of the Commonwealth. So how do we do that in a way that makes sense? And collaboration, relationship building is the key to all that. If you see what I've put, the slide that I've put up, we're going to kind of move into the discussion about the sequential intercept model. Big picture is looking at ways that we've been able to use the commission and the 70+ membership and the working groups to really be able to dig deep into the various contact points that we all have within the system and what those mean in regards to whether or not there's a different option or opportunity to be able to really change the trajectory for a lot of the families, a lot of the adults, a lot of the kids that we all serve. So it's important to know that we're looking at this not just from one lens of criminal, not just one lens of family, not just one lens of juvenile justice, but we're looking at it from all the people that we are serving within the court system. And that's huge. So we've already started a statewide mapping workshop through the commission. We've taken that and we're going to build a facilitator's training. You too can become a facilitator in Sequential Intercept model. We're going to then use that opportunity to offer to any of the jurisdictions across the state an opportunity to do Sequential Intercept model mapping with your community. So we want to walk with you. We don't want to just offer up a resource and then step away. We actually want to walk with the communities to help build up capacity locally around the Intercept, Sequential Intercept model. Excuse me. And then we want to keep that going with TA and training and other opportunities that are going to really be able to enhance what you're doing locally. So I think it's a very intentional way to be able to move forward, and really feels like a tool that is going to guide so much of our work. So we've already started it. And the judge shared with you that you've got an example of the model, of the Intercept model. How many of you in the audience have done this before? Great, great. And I think my question to Laurie and the judge is, why do you think this model is something that's advantageous for the commission and to take on when looking at local jurisdictions?
I think it's something that helps us organize in two ways. One, right, it's linear as it steps us to pre-contact with the justice system. So for folks that like to think in that manner, right, you're thinking step by step and you identify what resources are available at each step. But I also think it helps you organize the resources in your community in another way, right? Sometimes we talk about resource mapping, different community initiatives or grants will say, oh, we need to know what's available in your community. This helps you get even more specific than that. Who is the crisis line, right? What actual number am I calling? Who responds to that? Are they trained? Do we need to be trained? It follows up with questions that take you to a next level of providing services to the community. I think it's really interesting because lots of times if you're employed with the judicial branch, if you're part of court personnel, you really start thinking about your involvement coming at Intercept 2, right? The initial detention, first court appearances. Maybe if you're, depending on your trial court level, you even think about it more as being Intercept 3 or 4. But the fact is we can all have impacts at these different levels. Again, for judges, I'm going to tell you the impact you're going to make is sending an email asking for your community resources to come together to talk with one another. Not asking you to prejudge a case. I'm not asking you to fundraise. I'm just asking you to send an email out and say, hey, these are all our community groups. Let's come talk about what we can do with people before they get to jail. Let's talk about what our local law enforcement officers want to do. We found in Clark County that our police officers, and this won't surprise people who have other pre-arrest diversion programs going on, but our local law enforcement officers loved it because they are humans and they are heartbroken at bringing the same person back to the detention center repeatedly. And when they can take that person to a recovery center and provide them different points of assistance, they can refer them to other people that can help with wraparound services, that gives them hope too. Our citizens deserve hope, our communities deserve hope, the people that protect our communities deserve hope. This gives you, these mapping goals show you at different points where hope is and what the hope is. What are the promises of each of these interventions? And so it is hard work. It is unique to each county. It's not even unique to each jurisdiction. I can promise you, I'm in the 25th Circuit, that's Clark and Madison County. Those mappings are going to look entirely different. But it's all worth doing, and it's worth doing right because it's going to help our people in our communities.
Well, and I think it's also going to help you identify where your gaps are.
Yes.
I think that's the most critical thing in this. And I want to just note, having been someone who's sort of done SIM, right, it's fuzzy. I think sequential intercept mapping is incredibly fuzzy. And until you actually sit down and you have a facilitator leading you through it, you're quite a bit into the project before suddenly you have the aha moment that it's suddenly starting to click. But once it clicks for you, it clicks for that room. And that's why it's so important to have all of your partners there. And I'm looking at one of our county judge executives right now who thinks I was only going to pick on our judges. I'm going to pick on him too, because we need our leadership at both the county level and the city level, because the partnership with local law enforcement is critical. And Judge Maier, when we were prepping, said something, I referenced it a minute ago, but when we were talking about it, we mentioned this earlier in the session. Suddenly in Frankfort, our unhoused population has skyrocketed, and we have folks panhandling that we've never seen before. And it breaks my heart. When we had the terrible weather, the sub-freezing temperatures, we reached out to the local housing shelters just to see if we needed to open our building, and we're assured that we had enough beds, but I actually didn't know who to call. I had to make several phone calls to find out who to call. And you know, that was one of the things that you mentioned in Clark County. If you see something, you know who to call.
If we see someone panhandling or who needs other resources, we connect them with Clark Community Services or alternatively the health department. Now, I want to be very clear, that's a bunch of work that is done by folks outside of the judicial branch. But being able to transmit that knowledge to you all today, or to share that information in a court session, right? It's a criminal docket, it's freezing outside. There's no harm in reminding everybody the warming centers across the street on the high side of Maine. You can get these other resources here, here, and here. It's essential that we know what's going on. We can't help people if we don't have the knowledge to do it. And the knowledge is in your community. People know what's going on, what's available, what's not available. You've just got to sit down and talk about it. And if you heard Judge Leifman talking earlier, you know, he mentioned that transportation was an issue for his participants, right? But they found out that Department of Corrections actually was happy to provide that transportation because it alleviated budget issues for them and housing people. So you can identify the problems, you can identify the gaps, but you're also going to identify solutions that are not unworkable, right? These are not intractable problems. They feel that way because we've gripped them for years and years and years and not come up with an easy solution, but the truth is there's not an easy solution. But the solutions get easier when we sit down and talk with each other, when we work together. That's the only way to make this easier.
So the model was developed by the Policy Research Associates, and a statement that was made around it is, it depicts the juvenile, pardon me, I'm a juvenile, raised juvenile, so that comes out naturally. The model depicts the justice system at a series of points of interceptions, and you see that in the model that's up on the screen, at which an intervention can be made to divert people from the justice system and prevent them from entering and penetrating deeper into the criminal justice system. One of the best ways to be able to have that conversation is to be able to use our data to really drive what we're looking at through the lens of an Intercept model, and being able to take that information and be able to use it in a way that informs and educates everyone in the space. The examples that the judge gave really is about how information is shared and what resources can be developed. It also gives to your community partners the picture of what are the issues in your community. So not everybody is always aware of what are the diverse issues that are happening. For example, you just heard that in one community, unhousing is an issue, and in another community, it isn't an issue. Everyone knows where to go, they know the resources, they know the supports. And it really gives you a chance to figure out gaps and identify opportunities in a solution-based model. So when you're going through your sessions over today, tomorrow, the next day, you're going to be using a working action plan that really is going to help to inform what you want to take back to your particular community and how you want to be able to use those things that you're learning as opportunities to be able to engage. And it also gives you a chance to identify those priority areas. So we started this work with the mapping, back in February, with the commission, brought together a statewide group of people that came to the AOC in Frankfort and really sat in a room and just started to really move through what were opportunities for discussion around each of the intercepts. So we were broken into different groups, and we had those groups based upon what those needs were and what that resource looked like. And these are some of the recommendations that came out of that work. And I have heard every one of these recommendations this morning shared by different presenters and voices across this space. And I think that's a powerful piece. We've already hit on the fact that courts are great conveners. People show up when the court asks for them to come. We've talked about education and training, how what we're doing over these next 3 days is education and training. And I think what's important about that space is that we use this time to not just educate each other, but also with our actions plans, use it to move forward and have action on what we're learning. You'll notice in a lot of the sessions, there's always the underpinning of data. Again, data driving the conversations, making sure that everyone understands what the data says. Looking at a behavioral health continuum of care, how many of you in this room would think that your greatest deficiency in your community is a continuum of care? How many people would feel like they would love to see that? So this space gives that opportunity for more and more conversations, because that continuum of care may actually be there, and we don't know all the resources and supports or how to best access them. So being able to have that conversation. And then making sure that we include the voice of those we serve. We all work so hard to figure out ways to have peers and people with lived experience, families that are going through traumatic events, our youth, our adults. How do we engage people in the conversation that have lived experience and use that knowledge to really guide the decisions that any of us are making as a system, and keeping them involved for the long term, and that being such a huge piece. So I think that one of the things that we've talked about as a group, and that we wanted to talk to you guys about more intentionally, was really trying to figure out, if there are those options and opportunities, we want to get from you over the next couple days what additional resources you need from us. And so what I wanted to see if the judge would do is share with us basically what we consider to be those next steps when we're talking about sequential intercept mapping.
So as we kind of step to that part, one thing I did want to say, the last part, you also heard Judge Leifman talk about it, right? It is that peer support, people with common experience, lived experience, that's the secret sauce, right? That is the thing that elevates this continuum of care, connects people with the community, is a resource that once you have it, once you see how peer support systems work with behavioral health programs, there's no going back. I think that also speaks, though, to this idea, right, that individuals are self-determinate, and they are adults who deserve respect, to have authentic interactions with the court system, with the people that provide care for them. And that's important that we see that in all of what we're doing, right? If I'm going to drill it down to what we talk about at home, what we talk about is these are our people, right? When I go into the courthouse and I see everybody that's coming out of the jail or perhaps walking to the recovery center, those are our people. And I say this, and it might sound hyperbolic or silly, but I genuinely love them. I can think of no greater responsibility or privilege than to get to work with people in a criminal justice system, in a civil justice system, and try and see my community improve and the lives of individuals improve. I mean, how cool is that? Who gets to do that at work all the time? Some days aren't cool, right? And I want to run out of the building screaming, but you can take yourself back to that, and you can think about what we're really doing here and what the next steps are and why we're doing those next steps. It's really meaningful. It's invigorating. And we want all of you to feel invigorated and go home and ready to tackle these problems in an organized way with your colleagues at home, okay? So some of the recommendations that are important to Kentucky: the National Judicial Task Force to examine state courts' response to mental illness recommendations, right? That's a mouthful, but essentially the national recommendations for Kentucky following the statewide SIM workshop would be that Kentucky is going to work on taking this national model. And again, I think that's what's really interesting for us here in Kentucky. Oftentimes we get something that is a best practice and we're told follow the best practice. Or we get something that's a pilot project and we tweak it. But ultimately, you have to fit into someone else's plan or someone's model. What we're talking about here is taking something and making it Kentucky's. Taking something and making it Fayette County, Warren counties, Campbell counties, making it your own with your efforts and your relationship building and your communications with people. This is intended to give the state, although we're doing it on a local level, a roadmap moving forward, right? We're talking about progress. That is the goal here. We've been stagnant for decades. That is the reality. Despite fantastic work by people for us to get to different points, we've been stagnant, and this is the roadmap for us to move on. for us to help take care of our citizens and our communities in a better, more meaningful, holistic way. So specifically the next steps for Kentucky, we need judicial leadership. You've heard that a couple times during this presentation. You've heard it from every other presenter. We're not being subtle. We need judges to stand up and take a role. Again, send the email, organize the meeting. Do not do anything that violates your ethics. Don't go fundraising. Don't lose your mind. But take that title that you have and use it. Use it for good. Use it for a meaningful purpose to help your citizens. You're a judge because you care about the people in your town. You're a judge because you care about the people in the adjacent county. This is a way that you can show you care and requires minimal effort if you've got a good judicial assistant who's got a good list of emails to go ahead and send that out. During this summit, this is a big thing. You're going to have the opportunity to meet as communities to start developing the community action plan based upon what you're learning. So we're kind of giving you a preview here about what we want you to think about, talk about, maybe give you hints at what sessions you want to go to so that you can be prepared to go back and work on certain areas where you think there are gaps or deficiencies or perhaps maybe where a community member is not here. But we want you to start working now on solutions that best fit your community. No community is the same. No community has the same gaps. No community has the same strengths. So this resource guide is really going to help your community figure out where you need to make meaningful change. You're hearing that we're going to identify weaknesses, right? We talk about that. You'll find gaps, but you're also going to find strengths. You will find things that you didn't know were going on in your community, things to pat somebody on the back for, a recovery center, a church group that's driving people, to meetings or to recovery appointments. Like, you will find things that will make you proud. You didn't know they were there, and you'll kick yourself for not knowing it sooner. But you're going to find weaknesses. You will also find strengths. Listen to these presenters today, tomorrow, the next day. They're from across the state. They're national. Really, some of these national speakers are as headliner material as you're going to find anywhere. So take advantage of that. Think about what they're telling you so that you can improve behavioral responses at home. This is a quote, right? We've all heard this before. Do the best you can until you know better. And when you know better, do better, right, Maya Angelou? That's all we're asking everybody to do here. Don't beat yourself up if you did something wrong, if you didn't identify a resource. You don't know what you don't know. The whole point of these mapping workshops is to find out what you do and don't know. And once you know more about your community, more about your community partners, you can do better. And that's what we want you to do. Know better and do better.
I want to reiterate something that Rachel said a little while ago, because I think this is daunting right now because we're still talking about the fuzzy. And I think once, and as Judge Maier said, the convener sends the email, hey, let's have our first conversation about talking about this. It is something you're doing at a high level, but we're going to give you the resources by the end of the conference that you know who to call. And it's not going to be a phone call to Frankfurt so they can come tell you how to do it. It's actually going to be so we can come provide basically some technical assistance and support. Essentially, we're going to help facilitate your first mapping meeting. We're going to produce work product for you. We're going to help you identify if trainings need to happen in your jurisdictions. Do you have a local law enforcement agency that needs crisis intervention training? Do you need to find a way to fund a navigator to work in your court system to help your individuals who are coming into your clerk's office to help keep them out of the courtroom instead and get them diverted to resources? How do we become, in the community, a place that isn't just about resolution of conflict and something that actually has to become a court case? And I really think that's what we're working on. But we want to help provide, and I know the CSG Justice Center is here. The folks from BJA are here. The National Center for State Courts is going to be here later this week. Everybody is basically telling us, you find a community in need, and we're going to help you find resources to support that community. So I want you to know that that is what we are committed to. And I think that really kind of my driving point is how to make it easy to access this information.
Did everybody hear what Laurie said? Because I think that was a really important point, and that is that we actually, everybody hear us?
Trick again.
It's so hard.
Can we hear it? Okay, Laurie said, because I'm going to say this, I want to repeat this because it is such an important statement that she made in Kentucky, and that is that we already have national entities here, and we'll be having additional national entities this week that have resources and funding. Resources and funding. So this is a hard conversation. It kind of gets a little boring. It's all that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, your ability as a community to organize and be able to do mapping in an effective way could get you what?
Money.
Funding. So I want you to take that as the biggest lift. We will be providing to you in the next, I think, less than a week, the outcome of our statewide meeting. So you're not starting from scratch. You're starting from resources and supports that have been identified from a state level. They are by no means the only resources. So I encourage you to share with us if you're involved in any of the working groups connected with the commission. We need your voice, we need your participation. If you want to be involved, we want your voice, we want your participation. So our next steps is to get you out what we know and to help you as you need and really build up the capacity for what we're accomplishing. I don't know of another state doing this work that has this number of people willing to engage, grow, and learn. Let's show them what Kentucky can do. Let's show them together what we can do.
So I hope Shauna doesn't kill me, and I hope Justice Lambert will forgive me. Shauna has this great idea, and she has this vision that as we go community to community, that we want to help find a way to pay for road signs that say you're a certified safe community, and what that means to people who understand your commitment to this issue. And it's such a beautiful idea. I don't know what that looks like. I may not be here to see how that plays out, but I know our Judicial Commission is going to look at what this looks like as each community goes through the process. I think it's so important to note that your results are all going to be, we're going to have 120 different results. Mm-hmm. But the fact that we have 120 different counties represented here is just incredible. That's every county in the state of Kentucky. And I want to just say, you know, Georgia, a non-unified court system has, you know, I can't ever remember how many counties they have, more than us. Texas has 253. We're the third. We have the third most counties in the state, and we have some of the poorest counties in the country. Yeah. Let's go there. Let's go there first. We want to go wherever you want us. So I just want to reiterate that point.
I will leave. I can't not get a last word in. That's kind of one of the things they let judges do, right? We go, is there any further business? Court is adjourned. I may not get the last word now that I've said that, but this is all realistic. What we're talking about right now sounds kind of nebulous. It sounds like an intellectual activity. It doesn't sound like a real thing you're going to do, but there's real promise here. You just heard Rachel say, if you get the work together, if you start the conversation, if you have the first meeting and the second meeting, you have administrative support from the commission, from AOC, that can come help you take it to the next step. That gets you money. Money gets us data, and data is what drives change. If you want to see changes statewide, if you want to see changes in your community, this is where you can buy in and have an impact. Not just where you can, it's where you have to. So as you go to other things today and you hear people talk about problems and you go, that's a problem in my town. That's a problem in my county. We have that issue too. The way you can change that is to do a mapping workshop, get some money, change some things that are going on, give the data to the state, and see how the policies and the statutes in the Commonwealth are impacted. This is very real. You can really impact change here. You just got to put one more thing on your Outlook calendar, get an extra meeting in there. So if you're a judge, please commit to yourself, if to no one else, that you're going to organize that meeting. And if you're someone else here who's not a judge, commit to adding that meeting to your calendar when it comes in. Reschedule something else, ask somebody for court coverage, make sure you go. The biggest step sometimes is the first one. Once you get started, it rolls from there. The last thing I will say to judges, I know that you're already doing this, right? And I would say, you know, my primary social media right now is LinkedIn, trying to get off social media, but I do follow the administrative office of the court site, so I know, for instance, that Judge Lay had over 200 people at his December drug court graduation. Tell me that courts aren't conveners. 200 people at a drug court graduation in Knox and Laurel County, that is remarkable. Just in Warren County, I think had the biggest graduating class for teen court. Again, courts are conveners. You're already doing this. You've got the emails, you've got the contacts. People come when you ask them to show up. So just ask them to show up.
Anything else? We're done. So, we're done. Court's adjourned.